in. It was a whole thing. Okay, so we're going live. All right, here we go. Hello, Bright Sider, and welcome to this week's episode of The Bright Side of Life. I am your host, Melissa Bright, and today we are talking to Jon, or Coach Jon, who is a weight loss coach and emotional eating expert who has lost over 100 pounds. So, from nanotechnology researcher to Navy Marine engineer to globe-trotting nomad, Coach Jon spent most of his life running from his true calling until one question changed his life. Now he's on a mission to help others lose weight for good and leave BS diets in the rearview mirror. So with Freedom Nutrition Coaching, which is what he does, he marries the science of metabolism with the psychology of behavior change and the compassion of human connection to create life-changing transformation with his clients. I can't talk today. I wanted to have Jon on because we're actually heading into the holiday season where food is usually at the center of events. And now would be a good time to hear from an expert for us, or for him to give us his take and advice on this time of year. Jon is a former binge eating food addict who has experience with all of this. Jon, welcome to the show. Happy Thursday. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing, and thank you for that introduction. And I just love the fact that your last name is Bright. Like that's, so I love wordplay and puns and dad jokes and things like that. So whenever there's an opportunity for something like that, I absolutely love it. So I think that's just fantastic.
Thank you. I wish I could say that I thought of my podcast title. My boyfriend actually did, which it's actually not even that original. But I spent like 2 days writing down every possible direction, every word I could think of to try to do this. And he just walks in and he's like, "Why don't you call it The Bright Side of Life?" And I'm like, "Ugh, yes, thank you. Okay, let's do it." Yeah. So I can't take credit for that one, but I do love it, even though it's not crazy original. I'm like, my name's supposed to be Bright for a reason.
Absolutely. It's a perfect fit, and you bring a wonderful energy to the show as well. So
thank you. I hope so. I kind of have to live up to my last name. It can't be boring. They'd be like, Bright, that doesn't really fit.
Well, I mean, my business name came from a client as well, actually. So, but it really was, someone said to me, "I'm sick of living in nutrition prison." And I was like, oh, yeah, you've just kind of captured what a lot of people experience around food and trying to lose weight and dieting and all this kind of stuff. And so it started with no more nutrition prison. And then I was like, well, how about Freedom Nutrition Coaching? And so, and then the hashtag no FN diets kind of started. So no FN diets. It was a bit of a cheeky sort of rejection of, well, I say diets are like a temporary attempt to create permanent results. And that's never going to work. And so kind of, it's rejecting a lot of the ideas that we've had around weight loss. And I think as people get to know me, you're going to figure out that I have a lot of very different ideas around weight loss and the idea of dieting and things like that.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And that's the one thing I will say is listeners, like our listeners or clients or whatever it is, when they come to you and they say these words, it's like they stick to you. And it's like you said, the nutrition prison. You're like, oh my God, I got to do something with this because it's something that you haven't thought of, but you're like, that's how I would explain it. Yes. Thank you. That's happened to me with listeners before. They'll say something or they'll describe a topic or what they thought of the episode. And I'm like, do you want to write my show notes for me?
Well, I previous to that, I was just Coach Jon McLernon. And I tried to come up with something clever because when I explain to people when they're like, well, how do you pronounce your last name? I say, well, if McDonald's had a school and I was a student, I'd be McLernon. And so,
yes.
So I love I really tried learning with McLernon or something like that, but it didn't quite roll off the tongue and didn't quite stick. And so anyways, Freedom Nutrition Coaching, it was a perfect fit. And then the whole no FN diet started as a joke. When I had my logo created and someone was like, oh, FN, no FN diets, eh? And I was like, yeah, I like that. So I ran it by my clients. I was like, look, is this too cheeky or too rude? And they're like, no, we love it. And so awesome. So my Twitter handle is at no FN diets. So
I love it. Awesome. Well, let's get into your story because you have been literally all over the place. So let's talk about how you went from this nanotechnology, which I'm just saying the word, I don't even know what that means,
Yeah.
to where you are now. Tell me a little bit about your story.
Yeah. So, I mean, I studied chemistry and marketing psychology at university, which is kind of a weird pairing. And I'm kind of different. I've always marched to the beat of my own drummer and drummer. I'm not sure what you march to, but anyways. And so, but I was going to go into a PhD program. I was already involved in a research group, and the idea was to sort of funnel you into a PhD program. But I kind of got bored of research. Because it's really quite tedious and monotonous. And so I decided I'm just going to join the Navy. I'm going to go to boot camp. I need a challenge, or whatever. And so I wanted to see what that was like. So I joined the Navy. I did 3 years in the Navy. And in that time, I also met the girl who would become my wife. And she's from Australia. So I took a year off, went and lived in Australia. We got married over there and then came back to Canada. I did 3 more years in the Navy. But I decided, look, the military has a tendency of breeding divorced alcoholics. And I like my wife a lot. We're still together. And we didn't want that to be a case. So I came home one day and I was like, why don't we just go teach English somewhere? We got no debts, we got no kids. Let's just do that. And that was in November. And by January, we were on a plane to Mexico. And we packed everything to a storage unit and started living down in Mexico. But ultimately, Mexico obviously has some issues with cartels and drug violence and stuff like that. And I'm clearly not Mexican. Yeah, for those who are listening, like I was nicknamed Casper as a kid. So like, yeah.
Opposite of Mexican.
Yeah. I kind of walked around like a beacon down there. Now, I mean, granted, look, I loved living in Mexico. When people aren't after your tourist dollars, they're so hospitable, friendly. Like they have a bright culture, a really like friendly, vibrant, like bright culture, music and dancing and food. And, so it was really, that part of it was really neat. But we were also, kind of exposed in a sense, because if the police took us, decided to pick us up and throw us in the police station, into a cell and hold us hostage for money, basically, we had no recourse. So we kind of realized, we're kind of sitting ducks here. And there was some paramilitary activity. There was some, because we live in Guadalajara and there's a lot of gang violence and stuff down there. And we're like, we should probably like get out while going is good. We've had a good time here. And so we ended up going and living in Italy. But one thing, when we were living in Mexico, we met a guy from South Africa. And he was living there at the same time. And so we went and lived in Italy and then for the summer, and then went over to Poland to teach English there. And this South African guy who we'd become friends with, he came and taught with us in Poland for a while. But he had some visa issues and he had to go back to South Africa. So he was like, hey, why don't you guys come down here? And so we're like, yeah, sure, why not? So we kind of put the wheels in motion to go down to South Africa. And it was down there that I went through like a really traumatic experience. And it was only 2 weeks after we arrived in South Africa where I was nearly beaten to death. And it was, obviously I was really mentally and emotionally unprepared to go through something like that. And then we stayed there for another 4.5 months after that incident happened. Because it was kind of like, I don't know, a survivor's mentality or something. Like they're not going to beat us. They're not going to win. They don't get to do this to us and so on. And we loved the work that we were doing.
Can I stop you for a second? Because I can't, well, unless you tell me we can't talk about it.
No, we can.
Like, what happened in terms of like you were beaten? Was this like you were walking to your house and I mean, if you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to.
I've shared the story a few times, and I will say for those who are listening, I've done a lot of the work. You'll find as you find out kind of my story, I've had one heck of a an emotional health and mental health journey that I've gone through to get to where I'm at. But I have done the work, and that does allow me the freedom to talk about what is a really difficult experience.
Okay.
Without too much struggle. So I don't want people to get the idea that it was somehow just this lighthearted thing. I went through about 6 or 7 years of hell to get to here. But I wouldn't take it out of my past. I'll also put that in there. So in South Africa, we were living on a nature reserve, actually. So there was, we were working with underprivileged youth, and we were teaching them life skills to help, because they have a youth unemployment crisis and the public education system is just failing them. And so we would bring in these cohorts of students, and we would work with them on, communication skills, because English is often a second or a third language. So communication skills and, skills related to hospitality, whether it was like service or front desk or things like that. So we were preparing them for internships to go into the hospitality industry. And living out on this nature reserve, we had a cabin kind of tucked into the woods. So this nature reserve is a few hundred hectares, rhinos, giraffes, monkeys, all that kind of stuff, and rangers and all of that. And our instructor's cabin is tucked off to the side, and then you have like a dormitory, students sort of like showering facility and whatnot, and then the main educational facility, which was probably a few hundred feet away from where the cabin was. And so it was just one night. It was in August, so it was wintertime there because it's Southern Hemisphere. And I was walking back to the cabin, and when I was by myself, it's nighttime. My wife's back in the dining hall with all the students and all that, and the door was slightly ajar. And for whatever reason, it didn't like twig my brain, because I'm on a reserve, middle of nowhere. Like we have rangers, all that kind of stuff. But I look back and I remember the deadbolt sticking out, and that should have there's always shoulds, right?
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, there's three guys in the cabin when I opened the door, and I still didn't immediately trigger something because I looked at one of their faces and was like, I recognize you. And he was one of the rangers, but he wasn't in uniform. And I didn't see the fourth guy who was outside the cabin, and he hit me across the head with a rock, and all of a sudden I'm stunned, like, what the heck is going on here, and gashed my forehead, and blood is now pouring into my face, and I remember him like grabbing. So I was wearing a golf shirt, kind of like the one I have on today, and I remember him grabbing the collar, like the scruff of that shirt, with one hand, and then swinging the rock, and seeing him swinging the rock at my head with his other hand. And he was smiling, and that was really like very unsettling to see. And I started screaming for help, and I get hit across the head, and now I'm like stunned and I'm concussed. And I remember him saying like, "Shh," like as I stumbled and fell down, like, be quiet. And they started, as I fell down, they started like kicking and stomping me, and like they were really just giving it to me. And so those are some of the details that stick out. And for I'm a pretty big guy. And I was able to sort of get onto like sort of like my hands and knees and sort of crawl, stumble, and really sort of break free from what they were doing. And for whatever reason, they didn't chase me. I don't know why, but I was able to kind of stumble my way over to the dining hall where everybody else was, and say, look, I've been attacked. My face is covered in blood. I'm dizzy. I'm concussed. I can't really see that well. I'm in shock.
Right.
So it was quite a thing to go through. And here we are in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, who the heck do you call for help? And they're like, we don't know how many are out there, because sometimes they travel in roving gangs of like 10 to 15 people. And so, my wife was immensely brave in all of this experience. And she, we made sure like all the students were in the building with us. We got the doors shut. I say I was like, sitting on the floor, slumped over.
Right.
Like still trying to figure out what the heck is happening. I had a fork in my hand, and I figured for some in my head, I guess I was going to defend myself with a fork. I don't know. That was, but I'd been beaten pretty badly, so I was, I wasn't really seeing things straight. So I'm grateful that my wife was so incredibly like brave and strong in this whole ordeal. And they tried to break in. They tried to smash the doors down with shovels and things. Like, it was, the police did eventually come, but they had to drive about 40 minutes to get there. And when they enter the reserve, you have to drive down through a valley and come up the other side. So you could see from like 20 minutes away. And so these guys just kind of melted in the bush. And the police are really inept down there. They're corrupt, and they're inept, and they don't care. So that was kind of a really difficult thing as well. And so that's kind of the in a nutshell what took place. And there was a number of incidents that happened in the remaining time that we lived there, from being broken into to being robbed to other people that we worked with being attacked and stuff. And so every incident that happens sort of adds a layer of trauma to the initial trauma. And ultimately it got to the place where like we just couldn't stay there. It was like I was probably on the verge of a nervous breakdown, because wasn't sleeping at night. I was very angry a lot of the time, because everything was just being compounded. It just felt like we were constantly like under attack and on alert and head on the swivel, that kind of thing. One of the ways that I started coping was with food. And so I had to, and it's not like I consciously decided that I wanted to become like this binge eating food addict, but food is a cheap and readily available, in a way that we could basically, I could sort of change the channel in my head, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
Because it's, maybe if anyone's curious about what it's like to be traumatized, there's a book by an author called Bess van der Kolk called The Body Keeps Score. It's quite a read. But
what do you mean by quite a read?
Probably should come with a trigger warning.
Okay, thank you.
It's gonna dive
That's what I thought you were going to say.
It dives into some pretty heavy topics around trauma, whether it's PTSD from war, child abuse, sexual abuse, that kind of thing, and kind of explaining what's happening. For me, it was really helpful, because it helped me to understand what was happening in my brain, at least.
Yep.
because there was a lot of anger, a lot of rage, a lot of desire for like violent vengeance and things like that. And I'm not a violent person. It's I'm an empath. I hug people. I hug everybody I meet. So to have all of this, and they're called intrusive thoughts, you know. So I'm already compounded by these sort of the flashbacks and the emotional difficulty of this, and then I'm having these thoughts of like rage, and I'm ex-military, and I know how to, you know, I've been trained in certain like
kick some butt.
right. And so here, like, one of the things I want to do is actually try to goad people into breaking into our house and set traps for them. Like that's kind of the headspace I was moving into.
Right.
And that was when I realized like we have to get out of here, because like I might do something, because there's a logical part of my brain that was like, this isn't you. This is not who you are. And I was like, oh crap, like I might actually do something serious that I really, really, really regret. And so we ended up going back to Australia. I got a job on a farm actually, and spent about 3 months just working in the middle of nowhere in some rural farm town in Queensland, Australia. And it was really helpful to psychologically decompress. But it probably took a month of like living out there before I realized like there's nobody coming to get me at night. Like, because we were broken into so many times. Like we slept with weapons by our bed. So if you ever meet South Africans who've lived there and left there, like they probably won't, they may not tell you their stories. They might. But it's a very violent country, a lot more violent than the press would ever report, and it's particularly violent towards women, and there is a cultural aspect to it as well. So it's, you know, and it's a tragedy, because South Africa is a beautiful country. It is incredible, like just rich in natural beauty. You know, the people there are really, you know, when I say it's a violent country, I don't mean that everybody there is violent. I mean, it's a country that's racked by violence on a level that we can't really fully understand over here. The people, a lot of them are just beautiful, hospitable people, you know, and that's the part, like what makes it so tragic is their suffering too. This really had nothing to do with me. It had nothing to do with Jonathan. I say in one sense, I was kind of a representation of something they felt had historically oppressed them. And so their course of actions actually made sense, even though it was obviously a terrible thing to do. Yeah.
Wow. So. Oh my gosh. So I'm glad I asked. And thank you for sharing that. And you explained everything so well. You explained, I love what you said about the trauma and doing the work, because I don't know if I ever am going to overstep boundaries. That's why I always say, if you don't want to talk about it, I understand. Kind of like with me, like I've lost my mom, I've lost my dad. So like people are like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And while it is sad, like I lost my mom 11 years ago. Yes, my dad was this year, but I have done a lot of work to heal. And so I can talk about it now. It's very understandable for people that can't talk about their trauma. Totally get it. But I love how you explained it, because if you haven't done the work, that's very understandable why you can't talk about it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's important to share aspects of the story so that people don't feel like you're not crazy, you're not alone. It's a part of the human experience.
Yep.
And so that really laid the groundwork for the next sort of chapters in my life, and what led me to a lot of the struggles that I had. So kind of the next chapter was, we went and we're living in Turkey with my brother. My brother lives over in Turkey, and he's been there for 12 or 13 years now. In Istanbul. It's a really cool city, like historically, culturally, like it's, you know, Turkey's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And one night I couldn't sleep, and I was just tired of being angry, because it really isn't who I am. I was tired of just feeling like, and not knowing like what was going to trigger me, or when the next time I was going to, you know, and I never really acted out on my anger. The thing is, I pushed it down hard, and food was one of the ways that I suppressed it. Because I never wanted to act out on my anger, but it didn't mean it wasn't there. And so I wanted to kind of be free from that. And so I made the decision that I was going to forgive the men that did this to me. And that was really difficult. But and people, you know, it's not like I made the decision and all of a sudden like all was good.
I was about to ask, like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So I realized, first of all, I said I wanted to humanize them. And a lot of people don't want to do this when it comes to sort of like violent perpetrators. These are murderers. They killed a guy the night before. I left that detail out. But they beat a guy to death the night before. Like, that was their intent. It wasn't like just give me a little roughing up. They were trying to beat me to death. So I had to ask the question, what happened to them? So how did they get to this place in their life where this was their course of action and they actually thought it was a desirable course of action? Because when we understand that hurt people, it's not to excuse their actions, but now we start to humanize them a little bit. And
Yep.
so every time that I would sort of feel this rage kind of boiling up in me, and I would start to relive the incident, and people who are traumatized, we would relive it and say, if I knew this, I would have done this. And we're trying to rewrite the narrative in our head to change, because they took something from me that night, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
They took away any sense of naivety I might have still held about the world.
Yep.
They really exposed me to the other side of humanity in the most brutal way. And so I had to cultivate a sense of compassion. Every time that rage would come up, I had to consciously cultivate a sense of compassion for them. And again, it's not about excusing them for what they did, but it's about understanding that damaged humans do this.
Right.
And so over time, by doing this and by cultivating compassion and recognizing that forgiveness is not about setting them free, it's about setting me free. And so I wanted to be free from it. And so that was kind of the first step. Kind of the next chapter though was, now I'm obese and I used to be an athlete. And this sort of dissociation and loss of my identity. So now I have to grieve another loss. How did I get here? How did I get so big? I didn't want this. And so then now I'm wading into this murky world of like diet and weight loss culture, and where do you start? Because it never really been that much of a struggle before. Because
Right.
previously I would have thought like overweight people were just like lazy or undisciplined, because I was athletic and I was active and it's just what I did. It was a part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm saddled with food addiction and binge eating, and I'm obese, and I go, oh my gosh, like how do I dig my way out of this? Because everything hurts. Like when you're obese, everything hurts. I can appreciate the spirit behind things like health at every size and body positivity.
Mm-hmm.
But as a formerly obese person, I can tell you everything hurts and it's not healthy.
Right.
And so,
And that's where like today I like was kind of nervous. This can kind of be a sensitive topic.
Mhm.
But just kind of like you said, like sometimes there are just facts, like you hurt and things like that. So I like that you said that.
yeah, because I think weight loss is for a lot of people, their health would improve if they were to lose some weight.
Right.
Where the issues come in is when we start to create character judgments and moral judgments about people based on their appearance and their size and their struggles. And this is why I speak so much about compassion. And it's really important for me that I clarify that compassion is not enabling. So compassion isn't you're halfway through that bottle of wine, you might as well polish it off. That's enabling.
Yeah.
But it's like compassion is also not, you know better than that, why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
That's not helping you. So It's like you're halfway through a bottle of wine. Let's figure out what's going on. And let's do it with an open mind. If we know that all behavior makes sense, there's a reason why you're halfway down the bottle of wine on a night you probably shouldn't be. So let's understand it and let's be human. So I really try to approach this idea of weight loss. I wish I could say that side effects might include weight loss, like when I work with people. But there's an element of meeting people where they're at. Weight loss is still in people's minds. They want to lose weight. But the way they're going about it is the wrong way. So I was stuck being obese, and I took on the persona of the jolly fat guy. And this identity piece kind of matters a little bit as well, because the way that our brain works is we have a sense of who we are. We have this identity piece, and our behaviors will be in congruence with our sense of identity. This is why we'll hear people say things like, I know I shouldn't do this, but, or I don't know why I do this. It's because the identity piece comes from a different part of your brain. It doesn't come from the logical prefrontal cortex. It's coming from an older, more primal part of your brain. And so when your logical brain says, my logical brain says, you shouldn't eat an entire pizza by yourself in a parking lot, and I'm still shoveling one piece in after another, feeling like compelled and really out of control. Like eating was a type of escapism for me in the process of eating. And it was almost like trying to fill a void. Like, so for those who understand, binge eating is sort of characterized by these episodes of uncontrolled compulsive eating. And it's not like a part of my brain didn't know that this wasn't a helpful behavior. Like, and that's why so often, like, pointing out the obvious to people isn't really helpful, because it's not like they're unaware. it wasn't, it wasn't like I was unaware that like being overweight was hurtful to my health, and so
Right.
yeah. So I'm in this struggle. And I tried, like I say, my dieting efforts spanned everything from raw food, veganism, to just about being a carnivore. So, pretty much every fad diet out there, you can slot somewhere between those two extremes. And none of them were working. And I really started
When you
go
say,
ahead.
sorry to interrupt you. Sorry. When you
No.
say not working, do you mean that you didn't lose weight on them or you didn't keep off weight? What do you mean by not working?
Really good question. Any diet, you can lose weight in a short period of time. If you tie yourself to a tree, you're going to lose weight, right? But as soon as you untie yourself, you're going to go back to your old behavior patterns. Yep. And so I would lose some weight. So I say I lost probably more like 600 pounds, but the whole losing and regaining yo-yo dieting cycle, right?
Yeah.
And so I would lose some weight, but it wasn't really addressing the root cause of the problem. And so you take that artificial restraints, kind of like putting yourself into a straitjacket. You have to follow all these rules. But you're not addressing what's happening upstairs in the head. And you're trying to force this to happen. As soon as you take that straitjacket off, as soon as you leave the diet rules behind, boom, you're back to your old patterns of behavior, your beliefs, your identity, and so on. And so then the weight comes back. And I say that fat cells are the gift that keeps on giving. So once your body makes a fat cell, it's yours for life. You can shrink it, you can empty it, but it's yours for life. Because body fat serves a biological purpose. It's our famine reserve. It helps us survive periods of food scarcity. It's the whole reason human beings are alive today, is because we have this ability to store fat. And so body fat gets vilified, but it actually serves the whole reason we're alive as human beings on this planet is because we can store fat. So our bodies will fight hard against trying to lose weight. That's another part of the piece of the puzzle. And so it was in 2017. I'd hired a few coaches and really didn't get anywhere with them, in a sense of I didn't know what kind of help I needed, really, truthfully. I thought I just wanted to lose weight. And they didn't know how to deal with my sort of mental health issues, the things that I was grappling with.
Yeah.
And so I would feel so frustrated because I'd be like, you don't get it. You don't understand. And they'd be like, I don't get it. You know this stuff. You're smart. You're educated. You help other people. Why can't you seem to do this? So there was this mismatch. So it's not to put it. So many coaches don't understand like what I'm talking about. They don't understand how to, it's like, hey, I gave you the meal plan. I gave you the macros. I gave you the, why aren't you doing this? You know, this is going to help. I'm like, you're looking at the wrong part of the brain for trying to create change.
Yeah. And so, that's so important. Oh my gosh, it's so important because you can give anybody a meal plan or these plans, but if there's something else going on with them, like trauma or something else, might be a little bit more harder, hard.
And I often think about, like, because obviously I work with people, coaches probably think like I'm a coach, I'm not a therapist, but I'm like, you're also a human being. And in the practice of working with people, you're going to discover the real reasons why they're carrying around extra weight. And we live in the age of Google. So we live in this information age. I don't think that there's necessarily a piece of information I can share with you that you probably couldn't find on Google if you knew what to search for. So I don't pretend I have all the secrets, but that's not really where the magic of coaching is. Coaching is two human beings collaborating and working together towards a common goal. And that's where it is. So I hired this coach as kind of a last ditch thing because I went and had to have this health assessment because I was buying some more life insurance, and I had to get weighed and my waist circumference measured and my blood pressure taken, and it was kind of humiliating because I was at higher risk of dying sooner because of my physical health. And insurance is just calculating numbers. So like, here's these risk factors. You have all these risk factors. You're more likely to die sooner. So I had to pay a rider, and there was an extra fee on my life insurance because I was more likely to die sooner. That was a real slap in the face. Now this is, I get it. The insurance industry, man, they're just doing numbers and they're just calculating risk factors. They have their calculations. So I had to face up to this really uncomfortable reality. If I keep living the way I'm living, I'm more likely to have a short life and a miserable life. So I made one more attempt. So I hired another coach, and he's a natural bodybuilder. So I thought, okay, if he can show me how to look like him, I'll be happy. So I'm still connected to this. I need to look like this, I don't know, physically perfect, Greek statue.
The Rock.
Yeah. I know. Like, there's this whole conversation around masculinity and the issues we have, but so trying to, anyways, so he he didn't treat me the way that I was expected. So I'd really developed sort of this spiteful, like loathing relationship with my body. I was angry because I tried so many times and I felt like my body was betraying me. I still was stuck in this. I used to be an athlete, and you've robbed me of my own ability to do this stuff. And I was angry, and I was fighting my body and trying to make it do things. I was powerlifting, and I was, snorting pre-workout and consuming ephedrine and caffeine, and like just this really hyper masculine type compensatory behavior in a sense. And my body wasn't responding. And he worked with me in a totally different way. I didn't expect to be taught about compassion by a male coach, because really in the masculine sphere, we don't often talk about this. But so the question, because in the intro, I think you mentioned this question that changed my life. So he said to me, Jonathan, if you make a list of all the things you love and value, how far down that list do I go before I see your name? Yeah.
Wow.
So I wasn't on that list. So it wasn't that I was near the bottom, as I wasn't on the list. And in that moment, he just took like this glaring spotlight and shone on my the biggest skeleton in my closet, the darkest thing in my closet, that I hated myself. And I hated my body, and I hated how I looked. And so all of a sudden, like, it just that really rocked my world. So this is the power of a well-timed question, from a coach that I trusted and knew. And he didn't ask me that when we first started working together. He waited until the right moment before he asked that question. So now I've got to figure out what the hell is self-love. Like, men don't talk about this.
Right.
Where do I even start? How do I even learn to love myself when my entire life really, and I would have been like the proverbial set myself on fire to keep other people warm. Really like hardworking, live like a martyr, save everybody but myself. And it was really connected to maybe a deeper story that somehow I'm not good enough. And I might have never said it in those ways, but that was really the story, that the root or the core story that I was living in, that as I am not good enough. And I was living that belief out on repeat. And so you go, how do you learn self-love? I started with brushing my teeth. So it's a tiny action that says I care about myself. And when we want to change a belief, you can't change it by, we love the idea of this dramatic leap, but a brain can't handle that. A brain can't handle that much change, and it will drive you to self-sabotage and right back to where you started because it's too unfamiliar. So I started with brushing my teeth every day. And as that became a habit, so that's sending a signal that I'm worth investing in. I'm worth taking care of myself. It's not that I never brush my teeth, but sometimes I would skip it. So I made a point. I am going to do this every day. I'm going to start my day with this investment in myself. Then I would drink 500 mils of water. And then I would, then I added on. So what I'm doing is we would refer to that as habit stacking. But I really started investing in myself. I'd never really done that before. Not consciously anyways.
Right.
I tried affirmations. Nah, it doesn't work. I don't say affirmations, I don't say they don't work, but it's like when they're not in alignment with my sense of identity, like they're empty words, and I knew they were empty words. I was trying to without doing the work, I was trying to make something happen.
Yep. I love what you said about self-care. I feel like, and self-love, everybody's journey is so different. I'm on mine, and I talk about a lot of like what I do, and that might not be the thing that works for Jonathan. Like what I do for self-love, you could be like, I'm not doing that. Like that does not sound fun. I mean, it's one of my biggest things when I started with my self-love was doing something that scared me every single day, because I struggled with self-love and self-worth, interchangeable, whatever. It was small things to show myself, because my biggest narrative in my head was, I can't do this. I can't do this. I'm not worth success. I'm not worth the long list of things I didn't think I was worthy of. Yeah. So then let's do the thing that scares you every day to prove to yourself, Melissa, that you are worth it, but you have to take those steps, and it's been incredible. So
yeah, someone can't take those steps for you. And, when I work with clients, I tell them very early on, I said, like, I'm your tour guide, but I'm not your Sherpa.
Yeah.
And they get it. I can't, it would actually be really dishonoring them in a sense and very disempowering if I said, basically the message I would be sending is, well, you're too dumb to solve this, so let me solve it for you and hand it back to you. Now,
Right.
there's a part of us that kind of would kind of like that because it means, I get to avoid the work. But if you avoid the work, you avoid the growth and the change. And so if I just fix your problem and hand it back to you, you're not changed and you're not different and you haven't grown and you haven't developed.
I love it. I'm jotting down notes if you can't tell.
No, I love that. I do the exact same thing whenever I'm interviewing somebody. I'm an old-fashioned pen and paper guy.
Yep. I love it. So tell me, okay, so you're with your coach now. He asked you this life-changing question. You start taking small steps, listeners, small steps, not giant leaps, to self-love. What happens next?
Well, I started to focus on so I was also dealing with anxiety and panic attacks. I kind of did a little minor detail there. I reached a point probably from my stimulant abuse and lack of sleep and powerlifting and running a business 14 hours a day and just, doing the sort of the male rhino thing where I'm just going to smash everything in my life and try and make it work. And so my nervous system basically pulled the fire alarm and I started having panic attacks. That's another kettle of fish because I tried to hide that for a while because I still was perceiving that as weakness. Why is my body betraying me? And it's not. It's like my body's screaming at me, trying to say, you can't keep doing what you're doing. You have to change something. So I started with 3 minutes of meditation a day. Because how do you meditate? I don't know. I didn't know. How do you even start? I'm like, well, you don't have to be a monk in, a monastery or in the Himalayas or something. So I started with box breathing, 4, 4, 4, 4. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold. That's it. I would set a timer on my phone for 3 minutes, put some white noise on, and breathe for 3 minutes. And I was done. In the beginning, I couldn't seem to get my mind to shut up because my nervous system was so overstimulated from stimulant abuse, among other things, because I was trying to force my metabolism to run faster and using questionable stimulants to try to make that happen. Don't do that. That's not a good idea.
Coach Jon says, don't do that.
Yeah. So I started that, and that's a way to really, I can say now, it's a way to sort of tap into our parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest piece, where we start calming things down and bringing stress down. It took about 6 months of just even doing 3 minutes a day. I started to be able to wrap a thought in a bubble and float it out of my head. That was a visualization I had.
Okay.
Yeah. And it would float out the side of my head. So that was one of the ways of dealing with a lot of the sort of negative self-talk I had, the negative language, the intrusive thoughts and things like that would come into my head. For anybody who suffered from anxiety, I think the worst part of it is not knowing when the next one's going to hit. That was one of the hardest parts of trying to function in day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And so I guess I read an ebook that I think is really valuable for people. And it's by a guy he calls himself Duff the Psych. And Robert Duff, PhD, so he's a psychologist, but he goes by Duff the Psych. He's very down to earth in a sense. And he wrote a series of books called the Hardcore Self-Help series. So if you're not offended by colorful language, you'll find these are very strongly worded, but also in layman's terms. He wrote a book, F, Anxiety, and F, Depression. So he explains in very colorful language, but in terms that the average person can understand, what anxiety and depression are in your body and your brain. So that helped me to, again, kind of understand what was happening. And so I'd tried a medication, and I couldn't do it. I felt it was actually worse to feel like a zombie for 12 hours straight and know that I couldn't do anything until that medication was in my body than to go for a 30-minute panic episode. Because at least I knew my body couldn't, even though it sucked like horribly, I knew my body couldn't sustain it for too long. But you take a medication, and I had to wait till it was out of my body before I could feel normal again. And I was like, I can't live like this. So I started figuring out what are the lifestyle interventions I need to implement to at least, even if I can't make anxiety go away, to make it more difficult for it to show up. And so the meditation was an important piece. Talking to my wife about it was an important piece. So saying this is what's happening. And she knew, she's like, I'm not dumb. She's like, I know you.
Right.
We think we're hiding it. We're not.
Right.
She's like, I just was waiting for you to let me know that I could support you. You know, in my head, I had this fear that when I told her about this, like, because I connect anxiety to weakness, when in fact it's just like a nervous system that's screaming for help is kind of how I would define it. And there's a component to it that's not entirely psychological. So there's I think sometimes the temptation to immediately jump into anxiety is a psychological issue. There's also a physiological component. And so I will say I got help from I would call him a chiropractic neurologist. So I'm not a huge fan of chiropractors, but not if anyone's a chiropractor, I'm not trying to knock your profession. But this guy is like a unique individual. And he was like, here's what's happening in your brain, and here's what we're going to do to help your brain calm down. And so he really worked with me to lower the activity of my brain stem, to sort of calm that down, because that's where a lot of this sort of fear-based response is coming in. The other thing that was really interesting is a part of my brain called the parietal lobe. So we have that part of our brain deals with our ability to sense position in space. So if you hold your arm up, you can close your eyes and you know where your arm is. You know that you're holding your arm up, because it can sense its position in space. Well, for me, that part of my brain was kind of under functioning. So under duress, i.e. a panic attack, I couldn't feel my physical presence in my body. It was a very disconcerting feeling. So it would feel like I was floating out of my body or disconnecting from my body. So yeah, that really messes with your head a little bit too. Like,
yeah.
So my first aid technique for that was to actually punch myself in the leg, my left leg in particular. So it was giving a very strong physical signal that I'm present in my body, because it wasn't detecting the quiet signals. So I had to give it a loud signal that it couldn't miss by punching myself in the leg.
Right.
Now you try and do it in a social situation with nobody looking. Right. Because it would happen randomly in social situations for no reason, like to be triggered. Other things I would do is I would like anchor to another person. So I would make physical contact with them, just might put a hand on their shoulder or something like that. To ground myself, because again, it felt like I was floating out of my body.
Yeah.
But I cut out all stimulants from my life. So no caffeine, no ephedrine, no pre-workouts, no energy drinks, nothing like that. So I had to stop working out for 6 months. And that really sucked, because a lot of people view working out as a stress relief, but it is a type of stressor. And so I had to stop going to the gym and really prioritize sleep. I said to my wife, I have to prioritize this, and I need your support in it. And so, because my wife's a night owl, and and I'm not. And so, I prioritize my sleep. All of these things, piece by piece, step by step, meant that like now I haven't had a notable episode since 2019. So it's been over 2 years. I had 2 episodes in 2019, and I haven't had one since. Now, I will say there are times where I can feel it creeping up, where I know it's there, but I know what to do. I'm now in tune with my body enough to know when I'm heading in that direction, and to know what I need to do to bring it down. And I share that because I want to give people, I don't want to say that I can cure your anxiety or anything like that, but I want to give people some hope that there are ways that you can move past this potentially.
Yeah. And I love that you say that, because one of the first things is becoming aware of it, which we're all aware. Like, why am I feeling this way? This feels weird, because I suffered from anxiety for 10 years. But then like, okay, then how do we fix this? How do we address this? Now, I am on medication to help my anxiety, but I have never felt the zombie part of mine, which I'm grateful for.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm really grateful for it, but the physical symptoms are no longer present, which I'm happy about. Now, I will say, since I've been on it for a while, since April, I do notice my mind is starting to race a little bit more, because my mind is so all over the place anyways. So that kind of worries me a little bit, because I'm like, okay, am I just going to go back into the physical symptoms of nausea and all this other stuff? Because sometimes I do feel, and I'm not knocking medications, but if you don't do the work to fix the underlying problem, medication is essentially just a Band-Aid. And
and maybe I want to share something as well, that if you require a medication, it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you're lesser of a person or anything like that. There's times where it can be crucial. It can buy people headspace to do the work. But I think if you're going to use a medication, try to also do the work. So when it affords you the headspace, the freedom from fear of, like, say, an anxiety episode occurring, try to use that as an opportunity to do some of the underlying work. You know, if you lived in Red Deer, the city that I live in, I'd point you to this chiropractic neurologist who, but as far as I know, he hasn't been able to clone himself yet. He's a genius, like a legit genius.
Yeah.
And I think he's now doing like another master's degree in chronic pain, and is working with people with fibromyalgia. He works with concussed athletes, and he's just a really, really unique individual. And I think we're incredibly lucky that I have him in the city, because I probably wouldn't be where I am today if he hadn't done the work he did with me
Right.
to help my brain heal.
Yeah.
So it's maybe also in sharing that, what I want people to know is you might not be, you know, if you can't find a practitioner that's able to help you, it doesn't mean that you're beyond help. It just means you maybe haven't found the right person yet. There is probably help out there, and in the age of the internet, we might be able to connect with people in a different way that we couldn't have done previously. And so, don't be afraid to keep looking and to ask questions.
Yeah. And I love what you said about the headspace, because you're right. I feel like now, and I had done several different things beforehand, but in April I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, which is no surprise at all. Like, duh, I should have known that. But I do feel like, but I am doing the steps now. You know, I exercise, and I'm journaling, and I'm trying to do meditation. I've just like started doing hiking, which, I mean, being out in nature is just amazing
Absolutely.
for
so
grounding. It's awesome. Anyways, we could talk about anxiety forever, but we won't, because I know we're gonna get to all the tips and the advice and all that stuff. So
now we've got the backstory out of the way.
Yeah, which is incredible. So tell me when things really started to change for you, or I guess where did you decide to become a weight loss coach? Like, where did you finally like make this decision?
Well, interestingly, so a couple of years prior to working with this coach, I started working with a friend in a supplement store, because I do have a chemistry background.
Okay.
And I kind of became known as the supplement guru. So, because I've got a really good brain for like facts and random things. I've like an encyclopedia kind of brain. I can't take the credit. I got it free of charge. It just is the brain I have, right?
Well, I'll take some.
Yeah, my dad. I'm pretty sure I got it from my dad, because he's got a brain like an encyclopedia. So like,
yeah.
So I can't take the credit. But so I kind of became known as a supplement guru. So people would come to the store, and people would come from other cities to come to the store to talk to me, because I had all this knowledge. Part of the reason why I had so much knowledge was because I was desperately searching for answers for myself.
Yeah.
And so I was voraciously reading things like examine.com and going into the deep details. I didn't realize I was missing the forest for the trees at that point. But so I actually started coaching people, because it was just like a lot of people coming to a supplement store wanting to lose weight and looking for a supplement to help them lose weight. And I started to call myself a bartender without alcohol. And yeah, because people would come to the counter and, you know, I'm looking for a supplement to help me with this. And I just started asking a couple of questions. And before long, I'd be like, okay, look, the reality is I can sell you the supplement. If you want to buy it, I'll sell it to you. But I want you to understand that it's not going to do what you want it to do. Not if you don't do these other things here. And so I kind of inadvertently started coaching people. Now, I've been sort of in a coaching, teaching role most of my life. Like I was, you know, whether I was coaching basketball, like junior basketball when I was in senior high school and stuff like that. Like, so I guess I've always kind of had this ability to be, I mean, I taught my friend how to read when we were like 10 years old. He had a learning disability. Yeah. And so I kind of I've always had this ability to sort of teach and work with people. But most of my life, I hid in the shadows in terms of having this ability. And so this was now sort of being drawn out of me inadvertently by these people. And I just couldn't help but want to help them because they're looking for help. So then it made sense to start coaching them, because I could say, well, you know, we'll give you this meal plan, and we'll have like a little supplement protocol for you as well. So it would bring people into the store buying supplements on a regular basis. Now you have recurring revenue coming to your business. That business ultimately failed. There's another element to my story. That business ultimately failed. I was in business with a narcissist and a pathological liar. And so I lost my life savings in that, and had to walk out of there with a mountain of debt. So there's something to be said for, I don't know, when you walk out of a store after a bailiff has put a lock on the door, and thinking to myself, what am I going to say to my wife? Like, I've spent 3 years just about killing myself trying to build this business to sort of uncover that this was kind of a fraud and a front and this crooked accounting, and I've been taken for a ride. What do you say? And
Right.
so that was a pretty tough walk home in a sense. But there's also something liberating because now, I was kind of stuck in that business as well. And there wasn't really a way out of it. And my wife had picked up long before I did that this really wasn't a good business relationship, that my partner wasn't honoring the agreements and things like that. But I was like, no, I know him better than you and blah, 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 and in denial and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So now all of a sudden I'm like, well, what the heck am I going to do? I can't bring myself to go back to just being an employee. And this is not a knock on anybody who has a job and who's an employee. But if you know how my brain works, like I don't do that good as an employee. I was in the military for a couple of years, for 6 years, but and I was really good at what I did, but I didn't fit in that well because I have a brain that works a lot faster than most people's brains, and it's really easy for me to spot inefficiencies and ways to do things better. And the military is like a dinosaur that moves slowly, and so I just didn't fit in.
Yeah.
Same thing happens when I get into a job. I'm like, bing, 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 bing. I figure all these inefficiencies because I just have this brain that does this.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't work well when I'm in a job. It's either the employer gets offended because I'm telling them how to do the job better,
Right.
or I want to go crazy and like pull my ears off because I just can't stand the monotony of what I'm doing. So
Yeah.
I was like, well, why don't I do that thing that I've been scared to do for most of my life and I've already been helping people do? And so I launched my coaching business. At the time it was Coach Jon McLernon. I'm like, what a novel name. It's like, I don't think there's another Coach Jon McLernon out there. And I own the domain, johnmclernon.com. And so,
Right.
but how do you, I'm like, how the heck do you build an online business? At that point, I didn't even know what I was doing. So I started with a Facebook page and an Instagram account. And I was like, I'm just going to post information that helps people and, build up a bit of a following, I guess.
Yeah.
Which ultimately I did. And later that year was when I had a client that gave me the name for free nutrition coaching inadvertently. So that's kind of how that came into being. And then, I always ask my clients for feedback. Coaching is not, I'm a guru, you're a dummy.
Yeah.
It's actually, you're the expert of your life. And then I bring my expertise into this equation and together we collaborate. And so I work very differently than I think a lot of people. Because I say my goal is to help you reverse engineer your healthy lifestyle. But you're going to have an active role in shaping these. We have principles that we try to incorporate into your life, but you're going to have an active hand in shaping those principles rather than me telling you what to do and you just following blindly. That does not empower you, because my goal is not to, really, truthfully, it's not about losing weight per se. It's about creating a lifestyle that will lead you to a healthy weight and keep you there.
Yeah. So is that that's your philosophy, your approach, your philosophy?
Yeah. Now I'm pretty well educated. I could, if someone come to me and said, like, I need to lose 50 pounds in 6 months or less, maybe even 3 months, we can make that happen. But it's going to be really uncomfortable, and there's some potential ramifications from pushing that hard.
Right.
And I'm probably going to have to work with you after the weight loss to kind of help you get out of like what we've done. So it is possible. But for most people, it's not the path they want to take because it's uncomfortable, like really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so I would rather help people. It's like, why not do this once and be done? And who cares if it takes 3 months or 6 months? Like, you want to live for 30 or 40 more years.
Mm-hmm.
So why not instead of doing the hare, be the tortoise, because the tortoise always wins.
Yeah, exactly. So. Okay. So I'm going to do this little exercise with you.
Okay.
Well, I don't even know if you call it an exercise, but now that we've kind of talked about your philosophy and your approach, I used Google. I did not come up with these questions myself, but I do know that these are some of the most common questions that people will ask just in general. They Google them, they'll ask their coach or whatever. And I promise we're going to get more into like your philosophy and how you do things.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to ask you just based on like your knowledge and what you think of these things, because I'm interested to hearing your answers. Coach Jon, what's the best diet that I can follow?
I'm a nutrition agnostic. The best diet you can follow is the one that you can keep doing. Because if your diet has an expiry date, so do your results. And so if the real word diet actually is like dieta, which is a Latin word for kind of referring to your food consumption day in and day out. So it's the frustrating answer that there really isn't a best diet. It's the one that you can follow and the one that actually brings you to where you want to go. Now, there will be some fundamental principles in there, probably going to involve eating vegetables, probably going to involve lean protein, quality carbohydrates, less junk food, moderate to, low amounts of alcohol consumption, managing your sleep and your stress. Any sort of lifestyle intervention that incorporates those principles is probably going to move you to a healthier self.
Love it. That's a great, I like that you said about it's the one that works best for you. And I'll say my story in a minute. Next question. Do I have to count calories?
No.
I hate counting calories.
Good. Nobody wants to for the rest of their life.
Nope.
Now, I will say this, though. You want to double your weight loss results? Track your food.
Okay.
So, in other words, now that doesn't mean weighing everything and counting every calorie. Create awareness around what you eat. For my clients, they might want to count calories because I have some accountants who want to see numbers. That's the way their brain works. I'm like, all right, cool. We'll do the calorie thing. We're still going to do the emotional thing too. We're still going to do every other part of the puzzle. Keep a photo diary. Take a photo of your meals. We're terrible at recall. Our memory kind of sucks, and we tend to sort of shape things in a better possible light when we're sort of recalling. It wasn't that bad. A couple of drinks, that kind of thing.
Yep.
When you track, it's really hard to ignore the data. And so it could be a notebook, it could be MyFitnessPal, it could be a photo diary. Just somehow create awareness each time you go to eat, and you're less likely to overeat.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Do I have to avoid carbs?
Why would you do something crazy like that? Carbs are delicious. So there's certain things like keto that have really developed kind of almost a cult-like following. It has some merits. I'm not going to say that it's not ever appropriate, but the likelihood of it being sustainable is really limited. And I've done keto.
Yeah.
My experience with it is at a certain point, my energy just drops off, and you're supposed to become fat adapted, and it doesn't work. When I want to work out, I'll take a teaspoon of honey because I want some fast fuel. And that allows me to work out more effectively. You can never, it's like trying to put diesel into a gasoline engine. You can't force diesel into a gasoline engine. You will always work out better when you're fueled by carbohydrates versus fat. And the idea of a fat burning workout is a bit of a misnomer and kind of a myth. The fuel you burn during your workout is kind of irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know if that quite answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And I know all these. These are obvious. I've done the weight loss thing like 4 times, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah.
Maybe I'll just say this one thing. We're swimming in refined carbohydrates, and it's not doing us any favors.
Yeah.
So if you want to make your weight loss efforts significantly easier, I would say dramatically reduce the number of foods that you consume that come in a box or a package. Maybe like lentils aside or rice aside, right. But because the thing is that food manufacturers aren't making these for you to be healthy. They're making them to make a profit. Yep. And they do this by making them as hyper palatable as possible. In other words, as pleasing to your brain as possible. So they want you to consume more, so they sell more and they make more profit. That's the nature of business. And so if you want to make your efforts easier, I would say reduce your consumption of these things, because we don't, like drinking liquid sugar, there's never a time where our biology is going to shift in such a way that becomes healthy.
Dang it.
I know, right?
Yeah. Awesome. How important is it when I eat?
Not as important as we might think. So intermittent fasting, for example, is not a magic fix. It's just an easy way to create a caloric deficit in one sense. There are some physiological benefits to it, but it's not a miracle cure. If you're trying to, like, this is worrying about the minutiae. It's majoring in the minors.
Mm-hmm.
My general recommendation for people as a starting point is to eat 3 times or 4 times in a day. I generally have an aversion to snacking as a practice because it has no biological imperative. There's no reason to do it. It's just a little temporary. I feel a bit uncomfortable. You're not actually, and who are we kidding? Nobody actually wants to snack on vegetables. Like, yeah, okay, if you drown them in dip, maybe it's,
right.
Veggies and hummus. It's like, well, actually, if you want to achieve a healthy weight, one of the things you want to be able to do is become comfortable with a little bit of tolerable hunger.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a bad thing if we experience it. So I would say, as a general rule of thumb, I encourage people to eat maybe 3 or 4 times a day. If you would like to have a treat, here's my rule of thumb. eat that treat at the end of your meal. Don't eat it between meals. So when you eat between meals, you're eating it to satisfy hunger. And that's the wrong reason to eat a treat, because you're going to overeat it. At the end of a meal, you've already consumed, say, some protein, some veggies, some quality carbohydrates. You've met the need for hunger and satiety and nourishment. So now you're eating that indulgent treat purely to enjoy it. That's the point of eating it.
That's
right?
genius.
I know. On top of that, here's an added bonus. Because you already have some protein and some fiber and some starchy carbohydrates in your stomach, this likely sugar-laden indulgent thing that you're eating is not going to spike your blood sugar in the same way and have a crash afterwards, because your overall digestion is going to be slowed down.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I have one more of these, but
Okay.
I feel like this one's going to be maybe the most like, you can answer it, but it might be a little bit like longer to answer.
Okay.
How can I improve my sleep and stress management? And I feel like this is an important one because so many of us do eat because we're stressed out and we just want to go grab the first whatever it is.
Yeah, that's a really natural response, right? Because food, I mean, I was a binge eating food addict, right? Food is the cheapest, fastest way to change the channel in our head. And so I would say that the first thing is really maybe take up a practice such as meditation in a really small way. The goal of this is not necessarily to become a meditation expert or something like that. It's to calm your nervous system. So that's going to have the spillover effect. So here's what I say about meditation, because really it's just a simple breathing exercise at its core.
Right.
If you could create a pill that offered all of the benefits that like 5 minutes of daily meditation does, you'd have $1 trillion pill.
Yeah.
But it's free and it only costs you a couple minutes a day. It's that powerful. So when you start to lower your stress, your cravings go down, your sleep quality improves, your mental clarity improves, your energy improves. So that's like a really, like I would start there. You can always build on that. There's the simple things like have a dark room, wear a sleep mask, drink some chamomile tea, keep your room cool. You know, all of these things are nice. Sleep at a consistent time each night. Ideally 7 days a week. I know I'm a spoil sport, but I mean, really, we like homeostasis. In other words, we like routines. There's such a thing called social jet lag, which is where your bedtime is more than 3 hours different on the weekends than the weeknights. That is a predictor for cardiovascular disease. So it increases your risk significantly that later in life you'll suffer from cardiovascular disease. So if you're ever wondering, maybe I should try and have a little more consistent sleep schedule, it's like, well, if you don't like heart attacks, that's probably a good reason for it.
Yay. Now I can go to sleep at 9 o'clock on Saturdays and my boyfriend can't bitch at me.
There you go.
Not that he does, but he just always says, like, he'll always tease me. He's like, oh my God, 9 o'clock on a Saturday. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Well, but here's
Sweet.
the thing, like whether you're going to, go to bed at 9 or 1 a.m., like you're probably going to sleep for a similar amount of time, ideally.
Yeah.
And you should have more than 7 hours, like more than 7.5 hours, because we actually need 4 to 5 90-minute sleep cycles a night for optimal brain health. So one of the cool things that happens when we sleep is our brain cleans itself. So our brain will actually shrink up to 25% in volume, and that shrinking will actually draw cerebral spinal fluid into our skull and, in a sense, wash the brain, or carry away some of the waste material, and then it will expand again and kind of push that fluid back out. So this oscillation is kind of like a pump. Now, if you don't do that, you're setting yourself up for dementia.
Wow. Mm-hmm. You know so much.
I told you I have an encyclopedia brain.
Yeah, you do. Oh my God. Well, so many things are important that you said. The cardiovascular heart disease does run in my family. My dad just died during a heart transplant. Mm-hmm. So that's like huge, really important to me. That's why taking care of my health is really important. And then the dementia thing, I don't know. That's questionable.
Yeah, lowering stress will do a lot for your cardiovascular health. So things like blood pressure issues are not so much driven by salt as they are by stress. Yeah. In fact, only about 2% of your blood pressure issues could sort of be attributed to excess salt intake. This is not me saying go nuts with salt. But understand that like removing salt from your diet is really like, again, putting a teeny weeny little Band-Aid over a gaping wound when you need to kind of take care of your, your heart health and your stress a lot better. I mean, I really think we could attribute the majority of sort of lifestyle conditions that we experience nowadays to stress as a root driver of these conditions. It's not the only thing, but it's really at the heart of a lot of what we experience.
Right. I absolutely agree with you. Okay, so now for my little story. I I've done like weight loss stuff before. Like I'm not overweight. I'm 6 feet. I weigh 180 pounds. So like I've kind of had been blessed with like being super tall.
Yep.
But still, like I know when my body feels like crap, and so I want to feel better and be able to move better and all this stuff. So one thing I knew that I hated doing was counting calories. Like
Yeah.
hate it. Have never been successful with it ever. And then so I work out at home and I do Beachbody and all that stuff. And portion control and portion containers have been the most successful thing that I've ever done. It's super easy to know. Oh, I can only have 3 yellows in a day. That's 3 carbs.
Yeah.
Or 4 breads. That's proteins, or however many. But I know I can like the smaller numbers that I can remember and track, as opposed to 2,000 plus 150 plus that. It stresses me out.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I really like the portion containers a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a matter of like finding what works for you.
Yeah.
And for some people, the portion containers will make them really struggle with a sense of restriction as they look at like that, and so, but for other people, like for yourself, it works really well because it's a great visual. It's really easy for you to sort of picture how all this plays out. And so there's no one right way to go about this. And I think that's an important thing to understand, because there's a lot of gurus in air quotes, shouting out there that they have the solution. And I'm a dietary agnostic. I want to get to know you as a whole person, not just what you eat, and really take a deep health perspective when it comes to working with people. So we look at like, if you're carrying extra weight, it's not just because you have no self-control and eat bad food. There's a lot more that's in play there, and we want to take that into account when we look at creating true, lasting, sustainable health. And so my goal is that my tagline is lose weight, love life, never diet again, and that's really the goal. Like, yes, you want to lose weight. You also want to you want to build a lifestyle that you love, and you don't ever want to have to go on a diet again. And that's my goal. That's what I want to do when I work with people.
I love it. So whenever you first have a client that comes to you, and obviously the goal is to lose weight, what is really your first approach to that? Because I know that you say that you want to get to know all of them, not just focusing on the weight loss. So I have a feeling that this is why that you have such great results with your clients, is because you have this approach. So what is one of the first things you do, or when do you start learning about them? Like, oh, they're not just addicted to food because they don't have self-control. It's actually because of all this trauma or whatever else.
Well, it will depend a little bit on the individual and the level of comfort they feel towards me, because my responsibility as a coach is to, for lack of a better term, create a safe space. I mean, create a space where they feel safe and comfortable being vulnerable and expressing where they're at. And if you read the reviews, you'll see people talking about this. I never expected this from a male coach, but I don't really follow the traditional male paradigm. I have mostly female clients, and it seems to work really well, actually, because my brain works a little bit different than the female brain does, but I have enough. I'm an empath with a really good EQ, or emotional intelligence, and that allows me to work really, combine an engineer's brain with emotional intelligence, and it's actually this really cool combination.
Yeah.
So it starts with the intake, and we're going to have what I call a kickstart success call. And from there, I'm going to kind of dive into their story. So they fill in the intake form. That gives me some things to ask them about, and I'll be able to pick out of that. Here's the things that we need to know a little bit more about in order to, I want to know a bit about their history. Like, did you just gain 30 pounds over the last year, or have you been carrying 30 pounds for 30 years? That's something that's relevant. And then from there, we can sort of say, okay, well, here's the place that we want to start. We're going to try and implement this principle one thing at a time, which for a lot of people is really frustrating, because in the beginning we want to run, but you're just going to faceplant. I've seen it way too many times.
Right.
And if somebody insists on running, I'm like, okay, I'm going to let you run, but I'm going to let you know you're going to faceplant. And when you do, I'll pick you up, and then we'll start the proper approach.
Do you mean like run away, or literally run, like run for exercise?
Well, not I guess neither. It's really because by the time people come to me, they've tried a number of different things to lose weight.
Sure.
And there's a certain desperation. I just want this weight gone so I can live my life.
Yeah.
And so this is why we get stuck in the lottery ticket mentality. This probably isn't going to win, but you know what? This might be that one time. This probably isn't going to work, but maybe this is the one that's finally going to work for me. No, it's not, because you're not doing the actual work you need to do. And it's really hard to change yourself. It's like trying to bite your own teeth. It doesn't work because you're stuck in your own head, right? This is why coaching, in the age of Google, in the age of infinite information, coaching is still a thing, because it's a part of us that needs human connection. And so we're going to have a conversation like two human beings. I create the space for them to be vulnerable. They share their story, and we go, okay, now we understand why you're here. So I lead with compassion and with curiosity, and I set the tone. And then from there we say, okay, you know what, let's implement this principle, because we know the fundamental principles of a healthy lifestyle. It's, excuse me, it's not, our biology hasn't really changed that much over the last, few dozen millennia or whatever. So we already know what makes up a healthy lifestyle. The question is, how do we shape these fundamental principles to fit your unique circumstances? So we have a starting point, but it's not a hard rule. We're going to start here. You're going to try and implement this. Then you're going to let me know how it works, why it works, if it doesn't, where do you struggle? And then once we've got that habit or behavior established, because we want to tap into our brain's ability to form habits. When we can do this, what we do is we actually allow ourselves to start forming behaviors on autopilot. So the more we can take the conscious brain out of it, the less effort it feels to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And so that's part of this whole brain-driven approach to weight loss. It's one of the pillars of it.
Yeah. What you said just now is you try to take the conscious part out of it, right? That's what you said. I feel like when I'm most successful, like working out, is when I don't put all this energy into thinking about it. Because the more I think about, oh my God, I have to get up and I have to go work out and I'm going to be this, and I will talk myself out of it. But if I just get up and do it and like not think about it and just create this habit of make your breakfast, wait for a little bit, go work out.
Yeah.
It's just like another thing you have to do. That's been really successful for me.
Yeah. Well, there's two things that I'll touch on there. The first one is, in order to create behavior change, we do have to involve our conscious brain. So we have to bring our unhelpful behaviors into our conscious awareness. So the patterns of behavior that we've had for a very long period of time that are sort of sabotaging our health. Yeah. That's where compassion has to come in, because we need to be able to view them through the lens of compassion rather than the lens of judgment. But in our conscious awareness, we create the change, we reshape them into a new helpful, healthy behavior, and we practice it enough times that now it goes back into the habit vault. And so that's a really important thing. The other part of it is I teach my clients about setting CMGs, or can't miss goals. So this is a really cool thing. If we set a goal like I'm going to work out an hour a day, 5 days a week, and you've been sedentary, you're going to fail because it's way too big a leap. What determines the success of forming a habit is the repeatability of the behavior. And so if you set your goal to be, I'm going to walk for 5 minutes a day, it's so simple, you basically can't not do it unless you're bedridden. Now, of course, once you start walking, hey, you can stop at 5 minutes. You might feel good enough you want to continue. But as long as you get your 5 minutes, you tick that box. And then you start to build a streak, because you can repeat that behavior every single day. And the more times you repeat it, the more it becomes a habit and the more automatic it becomes. And once that behavior pattern is established, now you can grow it, you can build it, you can expand it. So I love how our brain works. And this is why I call it brain-driven weight loss. We're tapping into the way that our brain actually works instead of trying to fight it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like everybody should come to you for coaching.
I agree. I agree. But I'm slightly biased, maybe.
Right. Maybe. Okay, I know that we are an hour and 15 minutes. I don't even care, because this is such great conversation and such great advice. I'm just loving all of it. But I know that you have a schedule that we have to follow too. So we will get through a couple of more of these questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So these are kind of loaded questions, and I know there's no like black or white answer, but
I like loaded questions.
Right. If somebody was wanting to start their weight loss journey, but just don't know where to start, where would you tell them to start?
Reach out to me. I mean, okay, again, I'm slightly biased. Yeah, but I would say that honestly, because here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a conversation with you. And if I can't help you, or if I'm not the right fit, I'm not going to work with you. I will try to point you in the direction of somebody who can. So I think it's important that we understand the reason why I have such success is because I work with people that I can help. and I don't try to force the issue if somebody has something I can't help them with.
Yeah.
And so my other core value besides compassion is integrity. It's super, super important to me. And integrity means that if I am not the best person to help you, that I will steer you towards the person that can help you instead of trying to force the issue. So,
Yes.
but let's just say you're too scared to reach out to me. I would say start tracking your eating behaviors and really just to get to bring into your conscious awareness, what are my eating patterns? Whether you take a photo diary, like just snap photos on your phone, whether you jot things down in a notebook, or if you're an accountant who wants to use MyFitnessPal, use MyFitnessPal, right? But the idea is to create conscious awareness around your behaviors, because in that space of conscious awareness is where we can create change. If we aren't aware that we do it, we can't change it. So, for example, if you've ever driven from one place to another and you get there and you go, oh crap, I don't remember driving here. How to get here safely and not crash.
Mm-hmm.
That's the marvelous magic of our brains and automated behaviors. So you can't change a behavior that you're not really aware of. If you find yourself standing in front of the pantry with the door open, just staring, and then you suddenly sort of come to, and you go, how did I get here? If we sprayed your feet with that spray they use in CSI and we shine the ultraviolet light on the floor, we'd see the patterns of movement you have throughout your house and towards your fridge and pantry. And so that's where conscious awareness comes into the picture here. And so we create that conscious awareness around our behaviors and food, and that's what allows us to start creating change.
Perfect. Great answer. Jon. Okay. I'm going to tell you where I'm at right now.
Okay.
This is November 4th, and we have Thanksgiving coming up. We have Christmas coming up. We have holiday parties coming up. We have everything coming up. And I'm really stressing out for myself because I want to be good. Good meaning I don't want to eat all the food, but I love food so much. So
absolutely, so do I.
Yeah. What kind of advice can you give to people that are really, really stressed about the holidays because they want to have fun, but they just don't want to eat everything, but still enjoy the food? What can you tell us?
How many holiday meals do you actually have?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thanksgiving would be 1. Christmas would be 2.
Well, yeah, but if you have family, if you have multiple families, like dad's side, mom's side, uncle, holiday party, I can turn it into 6 or 7.
Okay. Over a couple of months, 6 or 7 meals. And so if you think about that, over a 60-day span, you're eating 180 meals if you're eating 3 meals a day. And 6 out of 180 is what percent?
Don't make me do that math. I don't know.
3%, I think.
Anyway,
okay. It's not very much. 3.3% or something. Very small number. You're worrying about 3.3% of your meals. And you're letting it dominate your thoughts. And now, when you start going, oh my gosh, I'm going to overeat. I can't overeat. Oh my gosh, I'm going to overeat, but I can't overeat. So when I learned how to drive, one of the things my dad taught me is you steer towards what you're looking at. So if you're in a corner, don't look at the tree, look at the road. Look at where you want to go, not the thing that's right in front of you.
Yeah. Otherwise,
you hit the tree. Well, the same is really kind of true with holiday meals. You put all this pressure on yourself, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to want to eat all the food and I'm going to overeat and so on and so forth. It's 6 meals out of 180. It's such a small amount of meals. But when we start treating it between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I might as well just write off everything because I'll just wait till the new year. That's, how much you can accomplish in 2 months. It's really incredible what you could theoretically accomplish.
Right.
And with really small behavior changes. So it's take a step back for a second, and instead of catastrophizing in your head, which is a cognitive distortion that we do, about I'm going to have no self-control. Well, you could, if you believed it. But if you convince yourself that you have no self-control, if you convince yourself, if you have these beliefs, this is how I'm going to do it. Well, of course you're going to do it because you've been telling yourself you're going to do this. If we get rid of the guilt around eating an indulgent meal. Now, I would say, here's the thing. I used to eat like a seagull swallowing a tennis ball. I've watched that happen. It's freaky. The seagull shouldn't be able to do that, but it does. That's how I used to eat. There's no enjoyment being had there. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, when I sit down to a meal, I take my time. I taste every bite of food because I don't feel conflicted or guilty around what I'm eating. So instead, I just enjoy every single bite. I taste it, I chew it, I'm present with it, I'm present with my company. And by being present and not stressing about it, I actually inherently eat less because I get full sooner. I feel incredibly satisfied. It's like, and there's going to be leftovers. Like, there's leftovers, cool. You get to enjoy it again. So it's like, take a deep breath, sit down, and just enjoy your meal, enjoy your company, and don't stress about the calories in the pumpkin pie or something like that. Like, but you don't need 3 pieces that are drowning in a bowl of whipped cream. Like, because whether you eat 3 pieces drowning in a bowl of whipped cream or eat 1 piece with like a line of whipped cream, like you're going to derive roughly the same amount of enjoyment from it. So it's like, slow down, taste every bite instead of like shoveling food down, which is how I used to eat.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Thank you very much. I think that's great. Okay. What would you want people to know the most? What do you want people, as Coach Jon,
Mm-hmm.
do you want people to know the most about weight loss and keeping it off? Or let's keep it to that question.
If you've been overweight like me, who have been obese, there's a certain biological reality you live with. And that is, I have all the fat cells I had when I was obese. They're a lot smaller, but they're still there. I've had to make peace with that reality. So if I start to eat like an undisciplined toddler, I will gain weight again. And once I made peace with that, that already took a big edge off the struggle. There's no temporary effort that produces permanent results. You have to decide that this is how you want to live your life. And if you can't create a lifestyle that you enjoy, you're not going to be able to keep the weight off because it's just too hard to fight it. I wish I could say that weight loss is fast and easy. And the truth is it's not. But it's worth it. I wish I could tell you the difference between me trying to lumber up the stairs aching and now, approaching 40, I can run up the stairs and scoop my kid up and I can cuddle him and wrestle with him and play with him. I am so present in my life. And so I say to people, weight loss is a doorway. It's not a destination. It's a doorway to a life that you want to live. So you need to have a reason why. So for me, let's just say, for example, I'm going through Costco, see a big old bag of chips, and my binge eating brain goes, I want to eat that entire thing. And then I look at my son, who's 8 months old, and he's the cutest little boy in the world. I'm not biased at all. He's just the most adorable little human being on the planet.
Facts are facts, okay?
Yeah. He was a mini M&M for Halloween, and it was insanely cute because my wife was pregnant the year before. She made her belly into an M&M. It was
that's cute.
I'll email you the picture after.
Yes, please do.
Where I'm going with this though is, so I have my emotionally compelling reason. So I decide, do I want to eat the giant bag of chips, or do I want to be present in my son's life? I want to be present in my son's life more than anything else in this world. And so that reason is strong enough for me to say no to the urge to binge eat, because the urges are still there. They're not very powerful anymore. They don't come back nearly as much, but they don't ever disappear entirely.
Right.
So again, when people might hear my story, or maybe they just see where I'm at right now. They see the weight loss, they see the before after, and they don't really understand everything in between.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not broken, you're not crazy, you're not hopeless. You can get there, but it's going to be a little more bumpy than you think, but it is absolutely worth it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so if people want to connect with you, if they are like loving everything that you are saying and you're like, this might be the answer to all of my prayers, how can people contact you?
My first suggestion is dropping off a bag of cash on my doorstep. I always appreciate that. But barring that option, you could go to my website, freedomnutritioncoach.com, and you can read a little bit more about what I do. I do have a free ebook guide if people want a copy of it. So you can go to freedomnutritioncoach.com/book. So it's really hard to remember. But it's an ebook guide called Crush Your Cravings. And it will walk you through a lot of things I've talked about here in terms of how to navigate emotional eating and how to move past it. I give people a 4-step way to do that, as well as how to sleep your way to a lower weight for a nice clickbaity thing. But it's legit too. It's not just clickbait.
Right.
So it's called Crush Your Cravings. I think that'd be a really helpful one. If you want to send me a friend request on Facebook, you're very welcome to. I haven't hit my 5,000 friend limit yet, so I'm really personable. I think I'll talk to just about anybody. So all you got to do is shoot me a message, whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Just say, hey, I'd like to talk. cool. We'll talk like two human beings. I'm not going to put you on some high pressure sales call or anything like that. We're just going to talk.
Right.
We're going to figure out where you're at, where you'd like to get to, and if I can help you. And that's kind of how it works.
Awesome. And also, I've never mentioned this, and if you are listening and if you have never been to my website, if you go to my website, once the episode is live, so as you guys are hearing it now, this episode is live. If you go to my website and then you click on the episodes and we go to John's individual episode, it's going to have his guest profile there that has his website and his email and his bio and all that stuff there that you can just click on it right there. Super simple. So if you don't remember how to get his ebook, all you got to do is just go to my website, click on his episode, and his guest profile information will be all there and how you can contact him. I feel like that's important. I probably should have been saying that.
No, that's a good thing. And then while you're there, you can binge listen to a few more episodes of this fantastic podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And you have your own podcast, don't you?
I do. So I do it as a live broadcast podcast, I like to call it. So
Yes.
I stream it live on Twitch, Freedom Nutrition Coaching, YouTube, Freedom Nutrition Coaching, Twitter at NoFNDiets, LinkedIn, Freedom Nutrition Coaching, or I can stream it on my Facebook, my personal Facebook page, as well as my Freedom Nutrition Coaching business page. So like you pick your social platform, you look up Freedom Nutrition Coaching, I'm probably there, and I stream it live 2 to 3 times a week. I wish I could say I have an exact time, but it's usually going to be a Monday or a Tuesday, and then I do a Friday afternoon, it's a coaches collaboration. So it's a panel discussion on everything that's wrong with the health and fitness industry. So we call it Wellness Unfiltered. We were originally calling it Dispellers of Darkness, but we thought we should be a little more specific.
So people know what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Thank you. Okay, John, I just have one last question for you that I ask all of my guests. In your own words, what does the bright side of life mean to you?
I love that. It means being present. So it doesn't mean that your life is perfect, but it means that through every experience in life, you can gain something of value from it, whether it's a hard experience or a pleasant experience. If you have this understanding that every experience in life can add to your value as a human being, your character growth, it's worth it. So all the hard experiences that I went through, I wouldn't take them out of my past because it's why I am who I am today. And so when we look through that lens, we live with a lot more hope and optimism.
Yeah, that's a wonderful answer. I love hearing everybody's different answers. Mine for a long time, well, it still is like the bright side of life to me is like being at peace with yourself and not at war with yourself. Yes. But what you said about like being conscious and being present, that is really part of me being at peace with myself, not living in the past and not being in the future, because that's where a lot of my war and all that uncertainty comes from. So I just love that answer that you said.
That's awesome. So yeah, and I'm definitely going to bring you as a guest onto Wellness, either Wellness Unplugged or Wellness Unfiltered, one of the two, because I think you also have a story worth telling, and I love being on the other side of the mic where I get to ask the questions.
Yeah,
and unpack the stories. So
awesome. I'm down for it. Well, Coach John, thank you so much for coming on here to share not only your story but all your advice for everyone. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to press in broadcast.